August the 15th, 1998, a 500-pound car bomb exploded in the centre of the small Northern Irish town of Omagh. It killed 29 men, women, and children.
Shock, complete and utter shock and disbelief that this had occurred. The scene is absolutely catastrophic. There are limbs, there are bodies, all strewn all over the street.
Northern Ireland's deadliest single bomb attack brought immediate condemnation from all political sides and pledges to catch those responsible. But 17 years later, no one has been convicted for it. This has led some to consider a frightening possibility, that the British Secret Services knew of the planned attack, but let it go ahead to protect an undercover British agent who had infiltrated the terrorist organisation involved in the bombing.
It has been suggested that by stopping the bombing, they may have been revealing an informer who was very important from an intelligence perspective for them. The state potentially allowed or turned a blind eye to their civilians losing their lives.
For many of the families in Omagh, the shock of the attack soon turned to tragedy. The Gallagher's only son, 21-year-old Aidan, was shopping in Omagh on the afternoon of the attack.
Instantly, I just thought Aidan's definitely got to be caught up in this bomb. I remember going into the bathroom and praying that Aidan would come home.
I made several visits to the hospital, but no Aidan. Later on was taken into the mortuary, the temporary mortuary in the military camp.
It wasn't till 5 o'clock in the morning till Dad came home from the mortuary, and he didn't have to say anything because he just came down the hall and Mum met him in the hall and the two of them held each other and cried, and we just stood by and watched, and we knew that was it was over, and the long wait was for nothing.
Aidan was standing just feet away from the car when the bomb went off. He died instantly. 3 days after the bomb, a splinter Republican paramilitary group known as the Real IRA claimed responsibility for the attack. They had bombed Omagh in the hope of wrecking the recent peace agreement in Northern Ireland.
They wanted to continue to shoot and bomb and hoped that they could, by doing that they would force Britain to retreat, as it were, from Northern Ireland.
But what if the British Secret Services knew all about the Real IRA's plans before the attack? What if they knew the bombing was about to happen, but did nothing to prevent it? In the 17 years since the attack, evidence has emerged that has led some to believe this frightening possibility. For Yasmin Ahmed, head of a charity that has investigated these claims, the first piece of evidence is an anonymous tip-off to the Omagh police station saying that an attack would happen in Omagh on the 15th of August, which is exactly what happened.
They went on to say that there were 2 individuals that were involved. They named those 2 individuals. They gave the address of one individual and the area where the other lived. No one would be calling and providing that much of detailed information unless there's a very strong likelihood that there is something in it.
But when the policeman took this information to his superiors, they decided that the call was unreliable and they quickly dismissed it.
That to the families is horrendous. Here the caller got the date right. He said there was going to be a terrorist attack in Omagh, and that's exactly what happened. A terrorist attack did happen.
But for many, the most shocking evidence is the fact that the British intelligence organisation, GCHQ, was allegedly monitoring the mobile phones used by the bombers on the day of the attack. And the monitoring is said to have picked up clear indications that they were driving a car bomb.
When the car was crossing between Ireland and Northern Ireland, we hear the words, "We're crossing the line." a very sophisticated intelligence service, a surveillance service such as GCHQ, would pick up that that was indicative of potentially of a bomb going between Ireland and Northern Ireland. What's also recorded in those phone calls is another saying, which was the bricks are in the wall, which suggested that the car bomb was in place.
It is unclear whether these calls were being monitored live or simply recorded. But for the Gallaghers, it is yet another piece of the puzzle that leaves them highly suspicious.
There is no doubt that these people were very heavily monitored. Why that intelligence wasn't used, why it wasn't used to alert the police and the military when that operation was moving forward, why they couldn't have been intercepted. These are questions that we need answered, and it's only the British and Irish governments that hold those answers.
It just seems incredible that with the information available that this wasn't prevented.
But how could the state ever allow a deadly bomb attack to go ahead? According to the conspiracy, it's because they didn't want to blow the cover of an agent infiltrated within the terrorist group. It might sound far-fetched, but for Yasmin Ahmed, it's backed up by the history of British infiltration throughout the Troubles.
What we do know now is that at the very, very highest levels, on both sides of the sectarian divide, were the paramilitaries infiltrated by the UK government and by our intelligence services.
The level of infiltration was a real coup for the secret services. But according to some, it came at a cost. Some claim that in order to protect their valuable assets, the secret services had to allow them to fully take part in the paramilitary's terrorist activities.
Violence was, if not being condoned, being promoted by the state itself. We know that people were murdered in order to protect other individuals. This was part of what was a darker world in Northern Ireland. And there were decisions being made every day by the state authorities as to whether they would be allowing certain violence to happen, not in order to protect their assets.
Could Omagh have been another case of acceptable violence? For Yasmin Ahmed, there is evidence that some people might be trying to cover up their tracks. The anonymous phone call made to the Omagh police station before the attack was logged in a special book called the Serious Threat Book. That book has now disappeared.
We have the threat book for the month before, we have the threat book for the month after, but we have no threat book for August 1998. It's gone missing. That is quite unbelievable. The threat book is probably one of the most highly secured pieces of property in an RUC station. It sits within the Chief Constable's room, locked in a cupboard. There could have been names of individuals who were informers, and people didn't want those to be revealed.
But even more suspiciously for Yasmin Ahmed is the way in which the investigation was conducted after the bombing.
Evidential opportunities were missed. Statements were taken after the bombing. Those statements were not often followed up. Vital pieces of evidence are not handled appropriately. The car, the murder weapon in the Omagh bombing, is left in a garage with a tarpaulin over it to rust. I mean, this is absolutely inadequate policing and investigation by anyone's standards. One can assume and propose that there was a lack of will on every level to investigate this bombing.
And even today, despite the continued appeals from many of the victims' families, Westminster refuses to allow an independent review into the massacre.
I think it could potentially reveal the fact that there was intelligence that wasn't acted upon, and that the reason why that wasn't acted upon was because they wanted to protect sources.
It wasn't their family members that were walking down the street on the day of the Omagh bomb. It was my brother, who should be alive today and be 38 and married with children. I feel like life can be very disposable. It's sometimes said for the greater good, and I would hate to think that my brother died for the greater good.